Who is Redeemos?
Who is Reeve Demos? That's a great question. I constantly feel like I'm evolving. So who I was 10 years ago is different from the person I am today. I feel like we all kind of construct a character of who we think we are based on our influences and the things that we've experienced. But I'm now at a point where I'm trying to be more true to myself and not fall into that trap. I don't like to pretend to be somebody I'm not. So
Talk about the shell. We all can kind of identify with that.
yeah.
That shell. Break that down a little bit. You say,
Look, I think our shell comes from, growing up and trying to figure yourself out, right? And, people, view you a certain way, then you feel like you have to live up to that image, to a degree. I feel like you also have, experiences where maybe you were made fun of, or maybe, maybe people treated you a certain way because they thought you were a certain way. All those things create a shell, right, of this person that you've kind of created based on your external influences. I'm at the point now where I don't want to, I want to break that away, and I want to try to become a better version of me. So that's the challenge, right? Everybody's got to face their challenges, and for me, that's mine.
what are some of the ways that you say you've been able to break free from that shell?
Getting closer to God has helped me do that, right? Because it's not about who you are. Once you start pretending that the world revolves around you, then you can start to see through that. You start breaking that shell away. Getting closer to God has helped me do that. Trying to be a better person has helped me do that. I used to be very self-centered, very egotistical. But I've learned that that's not the traits I want to pass down to my kids, right? I don't want my kids to think that that's okay. So I've tried to work on, changing that.
Now, for listeners out there, they hear this getting closer to God, and they, a lot of viewers, I'm sure they don't believe in God. What does that mean? Like getting closer to God, what does that look like? It sounds like you're talking about a relationship, but
correct.
What does this mean?
Yeah, that's it's definitely a relationship, and understanding that relationship is hard. It's everybody has to approach that differently. The principles that are taught in the Bible are the principles I'd like to lead my life by, and I'm talking about specifically what Jesus taught and what we learn in the first 4 chapters of the New Testament. Those principles are the ones that I'm trying to conform with and try to make myself a better person. Somebody said the other day, it's like, the Bible is for people that, feel like that they're not good people and they're on the wrong path. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that it illustrates to us that, it kind of helps us put things in perspective. What's important, what's not important. Our little bubble that we live in, that we see every day, and the things that we think are important, just a little tiny instance in the timeline, right? When we're trying to become closer to God and understand that relationship, we need to take a look at our lives, right? And not just a little snapshot of where we're at, but the whole timeline from, what we're looking to accomplish, things that we've done, and how that aligns with what they teach in the Bible. What Jesus taught when he was here. Man, it's powerful stuff. And to get kind of to understand it is a lot of work.
Do you think, do you think the Bible, is that a source for you for morality? Because you hear people talk about, I don't need a book to tell me what's right or wrong. I already know what's right or wrong.
I used to think I knew what was right and wrong. Okay. And what I thought was right and wrong wasn't exactly correct, because it was still hurting other people, right? I'll give you an example. When we were kids, we had a friend of ours who grew up around organized crime. His father was involved, and some, other people were involved. And, he used to argue with us. We're like 14, 13. He's arguing with us. There's nothing wrong with killing another person, right? Somebody comes into your territory, just like an animal in the jungle.
Yeah.
If a lion approaches you and another lion attacks that lion, is it wrong for that lion to take the other one's life? And he would say this all the time. Say, listen, there's nothing wrong with it. We had to put these laws in place to have civility, and he would go the whole gamut of the reasons why. To the point where you start to accept that and start to think, okay, well, that sounds like a pretty good philosophy, and that makes sense. And then as you get older and you realize, I don't want to be that person. I know that inherently I know what's right and what's wrong, and that seems wrong to me. Like that mindset seems wrong.
Well, you were in the military.
That's right. Yeah.
Was killing wrong?
Yeah. So that's something you struggle with when you're in the military, right? You that's why you're there, right? It's to defend the country, and if you have to take somebody's life, that's part of the responsibilities. But you're told that in defense of what you love, you might have to be put in that situation. I don't think killing is ever okay. I don't think it is. And then you start to understand the politics behind why you're out in these different locations. And,
right.
The kid on the other side of that wire is your age and is being told by his government that, he has to fight you. And so is that right or wrong? That's what you have to struggle with.
Let's dive in a little bit about your military career. How old were you when you joined? Why did you what prompted you to get involved in the first place?
Yeah, so I graduated high school, and me and my friends were hooligans, right? We were doing everything we shouldn't be doing. We were, I can go into detail, but listen, we were getting in trouble. We thought we were a small organized crime unit, right? We're doing all kinds of things.
And this included that one kid who
yeah. He was definitely around at that time. In addition to our entire group of friends at that point, there's probably about 15 of us really close. And, but we used to get into,
I can just picture it now. Hair slicked back. You guys wear suits, I'm sure, when you went to school. And
yeah. We were very, well known for dressing up. There was a club that was popular back then called Club Boku. And Club Boku was, the spot where everybody went. Well, when we would go, we would sneak in on nights where you had to be 21. We're only 18, 17 in some cases. So we'd dress up. We'd wear, slacks and dress shirts. And, they knew we were coming. So
fellas,
a lot of times they would call us junior mafias. They announced this on the microphone. Oh, junior mafia's in the house. And they loved us. And so, we get drinks for free and hang out. And it was just, that was our thing. Yeah, that group led to, different kinds of trouble. Like we were involved in all kinds of things. That mindset is instilled in you when you're very, very young. I mean, when we were, 10, 12, in the environment we grew up in, with people in that world, we were watching, and it's funny because that's how powerful music is and movies is. Even in real life, when you're close to that stuff, you're still listening to this type of music. The hip hop gangster rap came out. That's what we're listening to at 13, at 14. Taking what you want and not worrying about anybody else. And,
Now, let me stop you there for a second, because I'm thinking back when I'm 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
I still, at that point, I had no interest in girls. I know I liked girls, but I had no interest in pursuing any type of intimate relationship with a woman. I was playing ice hockey. I was playing sports.
Yeah.
Maybe I was wrapped in sports and team type of brotherhood.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine being that. How do you get at such a young age wrapped into something like that? And do you even realize that you're involved with it as wrong, or is this just normal?
No, it's just normal. I mean, you're around kids that, their parents, are involved in that kind of lifestyle. It's who's got the nicer house, who's got the nicest car. That's kind of like growing up down here in Boca Raton. Everybody moved out from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Boston. He had a lot of different influences. So, people are like, oh, you grew up in Boca Raton, Yeah, we did. But it was around a lot of kids that came down from other places that, that's the way they grew up. And that's the way we grew up. Looking at it now, you realize there was a lot of that type of influence. I was 13 years old when I was going to Omni Middle School. And there was gangs. There were gangs. There was Spanish gangs. There was white gangs. There was all kinds of gangs. And it sounds crazy to say, but it's spoken. But they were busing in the kids from the poor neighborhoods, and they were bringing them over to Boca. So there were fights every day. And I said, I want to start my own gang. I don't want to join somebody's gang. Let me start my own. So that's what I did. And that was leadership in you. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to join somebody's gang. I want to start my own. So I started a gang called Eastside Kings. I didn't do any research. I guess kings fight with if kings are identified as red, then there's another gang identified as blue. So you have that. I didn't understand anything. So I just said, okay, I like the name. So got the bandanas and it got so big that I ended up, we might have had 20 kids, 25 kids involved in our little school gang. And one day they fought after school. And I was getting picked up by my father, came to pick us up. And here it is. I just started this gang, and now they're having a big gang fight. And I'm being picked up, and I'm watching this thing as I'm passing in my car. And I'm like, what did I do?
You're happy you got picked up.
Well, I mean, I was kind of upset a little bit. I'm like, look, I should be over there. I want to be, but I was raised by a father that worked very hard, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And, so even though I was around that stuff, that wasn't like, my parents were doing the best they could. They weren't involved in that kind of thing. My dad made money and he had his own business, but I got a call to the house the next day from my dean, who called my dad to tell him, listen, your son started a gang here at school. It's causing problems. We need to get this thing figured out. And needless to say, he beat my ass. He beat my brother's ass. And because my brother Dave is 10 and a half months younger than me.
So he would kind of just...
We were like twins. Anything we did together. We were, we had the same friends. We started, everything we did together. So they knew us as the Demos brothers. And so that's part of the whole scenario.
So you start to get wrapped in this lifestyle at a young age. You're 12 and 13. And how far does this keep going forward in your life? Talk a little bit about that, how that escalates, or how as you get older.
Now we're involved. Now we're involved with this group of kids that all fit the same personalities. Probably have the same type of influences. So here it is in middle school, and I end up stupidly bringing a knife to school, right? And it's a pretty nice sized knife. Some kid sees me with it, calls the dean. The dean comes, takes me out of class, and I get arrested. And it's not good. It's not good. It happens to be my dad's birthday. I get arrested. Yeah, so they come, and then my dad, comes to school, picks us up, and then I get another beating. It ended up being not a good scenario. And that's kind of where it all started. My brother then goes and gets arrested, not far off from that. I think maybe it was that year or the next. They skip school. They go to that a neighborhood behind Omni Middle School, which is Woodfield Country Club. They break into a house. And as they're walking out of the house, they got this stuff. I'm in school, by the way. I always had the ability to know, let's not skip today. Today's the day I should be in school, right? And that day was when something big would happen. Like my brother would get pinched and then he would get arrested. Like that's what happened that day. He ended up getting arrested, carrying this stuff down the street with a bunch of friends. And we had to go to gun club to pick him up, which is a detention center for juveniles. And so we picked him up, and my father brought him home. And as soon as he came in the door, my father punched him in the face. It's the first time he ever hit my brother like that.
Close fist.
Yeah. Because we're, 13, 14, not even 14 yet. We're like 12 and 13. And, it's pretty big trouble to get into at that age.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like it's just starting to snowball. Why? Tell me about your relationship with your parents, because a lot of times you hear juveniles and they're getting into trouble, and you can always trace it back to the house and something going on with the house. Was there something going on in the house, or kind of break down the dynamics in the house a little bit?
Yeah. My father always worked. He was very, very hardworking. Wake up early in the morning and be home late at night. I mean, it was just nature of his business. He was an electrical contractor, had his own business. People that worked for him. So he'd be on the job site early in the mornings. Maybe he'd drop us off at school, and then we wouldn't see him till later on. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she was like a maniac. She was a drill sergeant, yelled, carried on, hit us. She was the one that was always handed out punishment.
Was you, your younger brother, and
me, my youngest brother, my brother Dave, who's 10 and a half months apart.
Yeah.
And then my brother Shane was just, he's 5 years younger than us. So he was, it was me and Dave got in trouble all the time.
But there was three of you?
There's four of us.
Four brothers.
Yeah. My oldest brother, he was off to his own thing. We would get in trouble. And at the home element was, we knew right and wrong. I mean, we had, a solid upbringing. We weren't raised poor. We were, my father worked hard, and, when I was born, we were living in an apartment, and little by little, we get a bigger house, and my father would make more money, get a bigger house, and just kind of
keep working more. Keep working more.
Yeah. So by this time, we're in middle school, and we're living in a very, very nice neighborhood in Boca Raton. He's, by all standards, it was, this is the late 80s. early 90s. And, we're living in almost $1 million home at that point.
So at this point, your dad broke you guys out of the middle class.
We're doing pretty well.
You're upper income now.
Yeah.
You're going to nice schools.
Yeah.
You guys are going on vacations.
Yeah. For us, instead of focusing on schoolwork, we're focusing on like, what's the next, when's the next fight? When are we going to get together, hang out with the friends? And back then it was like every time you fought somebody, they'd end up becoming part of your group, right? Your best friends were the ones you fought. So, we'd fight on the walk to the bus stop growing up, and fight at the bus stop, fight at school, get in trouble. It was always something.
Time wasn't real for 1 hour. Didn't exist. It stopped. What would you do?
Go and try to nail down the things that I'm working on so I could be successful. That's kind of where my mind's at these days. I'm trying to build a legacy, trying to build a future for my kids.
So you're saying that you'd have 25 hours that day and you just keep doing the same thing?
No, because if the time stops and everything around me stopped, I'm going to be trying to use that time to keep, my priorities in check, and, use that time to maybe do some research and make sure I'm invested in the right areas, and make sure that, I'm doing the right thing, financially, and, coming up with the strategy so that, I can take advantage of that.
Was there any drastic turning points in your life? And what were the catalysts for those?
Drastic turning points. All along from middle school until high school, me and my brother were in and out of trouble. I would stay at, I focused on graduating. So I ended up focused on getting the degree, graduating high school. I was focused on getting my diploma. And so I was in school more my junior, senior year. I was taking all kinds of electives and trying to graduate. I finally did. I walked the stage, got my diploma, which wasn't easy because I was way behind. So I had to do a lot of extra credit. Finally was able to do it, and graduated high school. So we're good. Okay. And then now what? I had no plan. I didn't know I didn't want to go to high school. I didn't want to go to college. I just graduated high school, and I'm like, at that point, everybody around me was like, college is for suckers. Let's start making money. Let's start doing what we need to do. There's a ton of things. My senior year, myself and my close friend Lance, who was like the Meyer Lansky of the crew, right? We always considered him to be the smart guy, Meyer Lansky of the group. He was already set up with a cell phone company, and he was selling cell phones at school. So, I started doing it with him, and, we would sell to the teachers, sell to some of the kids. And it was expensive back then, but we made pretty good money. Got to the end, and we're staring at each other like, what are we going to do now? And
right.
My parents decided they wanted to move to Vegas because my father decided that Vegas is now starting to develop in a way where he can make a lot of money out there like he did in South Florida. So the whole family packed up and moved to Las Vegas, out in Vegas on a mountain called Mount Charleston, which is like an hour. It's like 35, 40 minutes outside of Las Vegas. So we were secluded, bro. We got up there and it was very, very different from what we were used to. Just to go down to enjoy ourselves, we had to drive 35 minutes to the valley. And me and my brother did it for like, I'd say 7 months. And we were like, we got to get back to Florida.
What were you guys, you and your brother, when you're in Vegas, you just finished high school?
Yeah.
What's the plan for you guys?
That was the thing. We just felt like we didn't really have one. We felt like there's a million things we wanted to do, but when we left, we were having the time of our lives with our friends in Florida. So we wanted to be back. We wanted to be back with our friends. We didn't want to be out in the middle of Vegas, where Vegas is fun, but not when you're 18 years old. I mean,
you don't know anyone.
We don't know anybody. It's very hard to get into places. You're not going to clubs. You got to sneak in. And Vegas is very strict, man. It's not like South Florida. It's very difficult to move when you're under 21.
So you're out there for 7 months. Do you sit down on top of your parents and say, listen, no, this is not for us?
No, we probably should have, but we were just like, we want to go. Me and my brother are going to take a little vacation. We're going to go out to Florida for a couple of weeks and then we'll come back. And we just never came back. That was the thing. We took a plane ride out to Florida. We stayed with our friends. We were running around doing all kinds of stupidity. And when it came for that return flight, we kept postponing it. And eventually we never went back. My parents didn't really like that. They were very upset. well, we didn't care that age with everything we've been through. We were so anti, you know, mom and dad and listening to them that we just wanted to be somewhere else. So
So you're back in Florida, and then at what point do you sign up for the military? What prompts this?
not even then. Got back to Florida, and when we got back, a few months later, we got a call that my mom and dad got divorced. So that was a big blow, because I guess maybe they felt like they're holding the family together up to that point, and once we left, they decided, we're doing all this for nothing. It's like they're growing up, they were constantly fighting, always yelling, always screaming going on at the house. And so I guess maybe that was the last straw. Like they decided, we try to do the best we can, and it's time to move on. So they ended up getting divorced. We stayed in Florida, and it just became even crazier.
How did that feel? So they get divorced. Did you ever feel like maybe we shouldn't have left? We left, and the mom and dad get divorced. What were you guys going through?
Yeah. But we were so wrapped up in what we were doing, we didn't really take time. I mean, obviously internally, I'm sure we felt that way. We felt a little guilty. But when we knew that they had such a bad relationship, as we were kids, growing up, it was, like I said, it was constant fighting, constant arguments. So, we kind of knew it was coming, but, to be out there and not be back home, and there was a lot to deal with. It was a lot.
If you could implant one idea into everyone's head, what would it be?
I don't know. I went down this rabbit hole when it comes to near death experiences. And the one thing, you got thousands and thousands of these accounts of people that have these near death experiences, and there's a lot of similarities in each and every one of them, which is strange, right? So, but one thing a lot of them say is that when you pass away and you go up there and you're reviewing your life, a lot of them always have this account of going back and reviewing lives. And, you're doing this from your perspective, and you're doing it from the person's perspective, which is strange to me, which is incredible to try to wrap your mind around. So you go back to an altercation you got into when you were in the 4th grade, and you hurt somebody's feelings, okay? And you were mean to somebody. You're seeing it from the perspective that you did, right? Playing out from you. Mm-hmm. And you're also seeing it from their perspective, how you hurt them and how your words affected this person. And so I think if everybody understood that a little bit, and understood how impactful positive words are, positive interactions, just a little thing like saying to somebody, hey, how you doing? Have a great day. Smiling at them, how the ripple effects of that can change this entire world. Everybody says that. All these different accounts say the one thing they were blown away by was just how impactful just a kind word is in this world. And I think that's something people don't understand, is that we're all living in this little petri dish of what we call life, right? That's going to be over before you can even bat an eye. We're vapor. I think it was described in the Bible that we're mist. We form and we're gone. We're going to be, before you know it, looking back on this life. And, we don't have time to waste. I mean, we really need to take that seriously. That idea of the ripple effect of how positive a word can be, and the idea of reliving your life experiences through somebody else's eyes and how your actions impact somebody, I think is something I would love to see implanted in everybody's head, because I think it could make this world completely different.
Do you think about death a lot?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Is that something that helps you appreciate the present moment, or it sounds like what you're saying is at a certain point you accepted your mortality?
Oh yeah,
and it has given you a certain appreciation for life.
For sure. Yeah, I think I've always thought about it, maybe in different ways, but, I think I've always thought about it.
Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
Yes. Yeah, I've definitely been to the Bahamas. It was, I was in the restaurant business after I got out of the military, and I'd say around just after the housing market crash, 2009, 2010, we had some restaurants in Tennessee, and we had to basically walk away because our lines of credit dried up right after that housing market crash. They weren't lending money to anybody. And if you lived on bank lines of credit to keep your business afloat, a lot of those businesses ended up closing. And so that's how it was for these restaurants. We were making money, and we had cash flow, but once you cut those lines of credit off and banks stop lending, it's lights out. So we ended up having to make a move. We came back down to Florida, and I was used to living a certain lifestyle, and I didn't want to give that up. So again, those bad habits going back to when I was a kid, that thought process started to rear its ugly head. And, I had a friend of mine that ended up doing some time. He was locked up in a detention center down in Miami. It's actually a federal correction center. And he had some connections when it came to the Bahamas. And, at that time I was talking to him and I wanted to get some, instant cash going. And weed was a big, an easy way to do that. So
Square grouper.
Yeah, that's a square grouper. So we would go, and I ended up getting in contact with somebody that was a boat captain that had been doing this for a long, long time. He taught me how to go from Miami to the Bahamas, which Bimini is the closest island in the Bahama chain to the United States.
And how far is that from?
By boat, it's about 2.5 hours. So I would get on the boat, leave out of Hullover Beach, which is Miami, North Miami. That's the inlet. One of the hardest inlets to come in and out of, but I learned how to do it pretty well. And I would take this boat and I would take it across to the Bahamas, to Bimini, and I would meet some people there and they would show me around the island. And, I didn't do some reconnaissance at first, get to know the lay of the land. The people, these people don't trust you right off the bat. So there's a couple of times where I'm sitting in a bar in the Bahamas waiting to meet somebody and talk to them, BS with them a little bit, get to know them and develop a relationship to the point where then I could start bringing weed, and not just a small amount. We're talking, hundreds of pounds of it, into the boat and bring it back to the United States, to Miami. And we had people over in Miami that would take it, and then they would pay us, for the transport. The whole idea was, a young guy on a boat, driving back and forth, it's a little less conspicuous, if you're an American, and you know how to handle yourself. And, and I'm just like, that's a person I can have a conversation, even if I was boarded, by Coast Guard or something, I could probably talk my way out of it. At least I thought.
What type of money were you talking about?
Per trip, you're probably talking about $35,000 per trip, Yeah. So.
And how old were you at this time?
This was 2010. I was probably just turned 30. It was like, around that age.
Now, so let's backtrack. You and your brothers are like, Mom and Dad, we're not doing Vegas. We're going to go visit Florida. Yeah. You stay in Florida. Then you go to Tennessee.
No. So we come back to Florida and we start hanging out with my friends and we go ham, right? Now we're like, let's do this. We're not in school. We're going to start our own organized crime syndicate. And we got close to a guy that was living in Boca he was an associate for one of the crime families. And, he would get us our fake IDs. So we started doing this on a regular basis, and we're eating at some of the nicest restaurants. We're spending, $800-900 per meal. And yeah, it was an interesting time. We had a place that we would get a lease on an apartment and just not pay it and just put it into somebody else's name, somebody's fake name. And we're master manipulators when it came to, living a lifestyle and going down to South Beach all the time, spending money down there. And, it was starting to snowball into something that wasn't going in the right direction. So me and my buddy Lance, who, is a smart guy, he's the same one that ended up doing the 10 years in jail, but I'll get back to that. He said, let's get out of here. Let's go back to Vegas. Let's start a dry clean and delivery route. All right. In Vegas. So we're like, let's break away from this because this isn't us. We don't want to be, and I'm always the one, I'm a Libra. I was always the one talking people out of things. Right. I always was not comfortable doing this kind of stuff, but at the same time we would do it. And,
Lance is kind of like the black sheep of the group. It sounds like he's more inept he's doing legitimate things.
He's doing
still hustling, but doing legitimate.
He was very smart, but he lived the same code that we did. He was all about making money, and he was very good at coming up with ideas. For instance, back then movie theaters took on a lot of money. They ended up taking on a lot of money. So we formulated this whole plan with the movie theater that we were going to go in there and just take the money, right? On a Friday, Saturday night, movie theaters always took in cash. Back then, there was no credit card. Like movie theaters were cash only. So they were taking all this cash and we were like, this is the easiest heist in the world. We go in there and we take these bags of money. These are 18, 19-year-old kids. They're not going to say no. So we had it all ready.
This is like a Netflix documentary. I could see it now.
Yeah. So we right down to like, who would be driving, what avenues to take when you left. We had the whole scenario played out. We even went to Tallahassee where we could get liquid nitrogen, because in case it was in a safe, we get the thermos of liquid nitrogen. We could break the safe open, you freeze it, right, and you shatter it. We had it all down.
I don't break into a safe.
Yeah, we're pretty well versed at that point. We were, had the whole plan. Went up to Tallahassee to get the liquid nitrogen, but didn't realize you had to have a specific type of thermos to keep this in, and it just dissipated by the time we got back. It was gone. So
I'm thinking of Back to the Future, Marty McFly.
Yeah,
having this what is it, plutonium?
Kids. They were pretty crazy enough. That's what they did for a living. And we were the kids that would, do a lot of the dirt. And I can't even expand on another story.
So at some point, then you get in the military. I want to talk more about your military career. But let's go back to this trip to the Bahamas. So you're going back and forth several times. You're making $30,000 each time you go to the Bahamas. It's a ton of money. You're a young kid. You're saving it up. You're partying.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it was the first 6-7 trips was all reconnaissance and all just getting to know the place, and then we finally got to the trips, and I got a couple of those under my belt. Came back, we had money. I was working very little, and and it was nice, but that stuff it always comes to an end at some point. Decided, after my brother was like, I want to be on the boat, I want to go, and so I ended up taking him with on this last particular time, and got over there, set it up, and was waiting for the boat to be loaded. We got it loaded, and we left.
And where are you guys staying when you're over there?
There was a little village called Bimini Sands. It was like townhomes and stuff, and we'd dock right there, and we'd stay. We had a person that owned one there, and we'd hang out there.
So you had it set up, the housing set up?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to paint this picture. You arrived. Someone's waiting for you.
We would leave early in the morning, get across, and we get there and dock the boat, refill it, and then they would take the boat and load it up. Okay, while we're at the house, they have the boat, they're loading it up. So we were just hanging out. And so once the boat's done, we would then wait a little bit, then board it and head back. You have these windows. If you're going to get back, you got to do it with a certain window, because those seas here are pretty tough. Between here and the Bahamas, there's a river that runs down the eastern seaboard called the Gulf Stream. And this Gulf Stream is moving. So, it could look flat when you're standing there in the Bahamas or standing there in Florida. When you get out to that Gulf Stream, depending on the time of year, it could be 4 to 5 foot seas.
So it's like crossing a river while you're already on the ocean.
You're on the ocean, and and in that river, you've got ocean liners, and it's like a highway out there. So there's a lot of things.
And you're not trained to captain a boat or really
No, I did all of this on the fly. I mean, I had military experience. I mean, for me, it wasn't that difficult, but I learned everything, right then when I was learning the process. I learned how to take the boat and, navigate those kind of waters. I always did it with a group of people, so that, you're not going over there by yourself, because if that boat stalls or you're out in the middle of nowhere, it could be pretty life-threatening.
So you're on the last trip. Your brother wants to go with you. Yeah. Take us through that morning.
I picked him up. It's still dark outside, and we went over to the marina, got the boat, dropped it in, and we went across. And it's just like every other time. It was like seas were good. We got across. I did see a Coast Guard helicopter, which is something I'd never seen before, which kind of stood out to me. Looking back, I remembered thinking about that. But we got on the island, did our thing, sat there, waited for the boat to be weighted down, and we left. And it was probably just shortly after we left the marina, got out, maybe not even a mile off. I saw a Coast Guard cutter. And, there must have been, when we left, there was like 5, 6, 7 other boats that were going. It's always like a highway out there. But I saw them coming right at us. And, instead of trying to get away or trying to think I could somehow, I knew that I was going to outrun these guys. I slowed down, and they were surely coming at us. So it wasn't a mistake at that point. It wasn't like they were going to pass us. They were coming right for us. So I slowed the boat down, and I came to a stop, and here they come. They jump off on this little raft, and they come speeding up, and, guns drawn, and, they ask us to cut the engine.
What are you feeling at this time? Right?
I was looking at my brother like, this isn't good.
But you had already served in the military, so did you in a sense feel like these are your brothers? And they're just kind of doing their job?
100%.
You understood.
My perspective is much different from somebody else.
Right, because I'm thinking,
I've been on the other side of that gun.
I was in the military. Civilian.
Yeah.
And guys show up with guns. I'm breaking the law, worse than breaking the law. This is a felony.
Sure.
I'm freaking out. And
Not friendly. No, I'm thinking more along the lines of don't tell them anything. If the least you say, the better off it's going to be. You're not going to help your situation by talking. And they tried all the way to the detention center to try to get us to tell them a story and tell them something, and I just refused to talk. Told my brother the same thing. So you're not going to gain anything. Let's just be quiet. And I didn't know it then, but there was no investigation. There was nothing. It was just a circumstantial evidence case. So I could have got off, even though my boat was weighted down. The boat didn't belong to me. I had military experience. I could have easily took that to court, took that case to court. But because my brother was with me and he had an extensive criminal record, by that time he had like 9 or 10 charges of just stuff that were kids that had escalated and evolved.
And how much? What are we talking? How big of a load?
It was 200 pounds of weed, and it was just under the minimum mandatory. If it was anything more than that, it would have been 5 years mandatory.
And was that by design?
It was by design. Yeah, the people that we were with knew that if God forbid we did get pinched, if it was under a kilo, don't quote me on that. I think it's the minimum mandatory. I believe was whatever we were carrying. It was within pounds, because I remember the attorney saying that to the prosecutor on the phone. Like, oh, these guys were smart. They kept it under the minimum mandatory. And for that reason was the reason, that we didn't get the book thrown at us. Because in the federal system, they point you out. You get arrested,
right?
Your crime has points. And, those points could, take you straight to a medium security prison, just depending on your history, which happened to my brother. Because of my brother's criminal history, when we got in trouble that time, he pointed out to a medium security. So he had to go when he got arrested, ended up having to go to a medium security after being sentenced.
Wait, so you guys get pinched. Your brother has to go away for a while. What happens to you?
Well, when we got pinched, we got both thrown into the detention center down in Miami. So they take us in, they hand us over to Homeland Security. Homeland Security, which by the way, looked like a bunch of kids. I mean, they come up, they look like, you would see them at a club, you wouldn't even know they were Homeland Security. They spoke fluent Spanish, but they were whiter than I was. And they all had badges and guns, dressed in like, civilian clothes. And
probably the type of kids that you were trying on in middle school.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, they were trying to get us to talk, and like, I said, guys, I know I'm coming from a different, thought process. I was in the military. I did law enforcement in the military. There was at one point in my career. And I said, I'm not saying anything. We're not going to talk. Thankfully, they took us to the federal detention center, the federal holding center, because they could have took us to the city of Miami's jail, and that is one of the worst, So they drove us in, they turn us in, and we go up to the elevator. And the way this facility works is that the top floor is reserved for like international criminals. Okay, so that's like call it the 12th floor. The elevator took us up to the 11th floor, because in their mind, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know that this was like some international trafficking ring, or they had no idea. So they took us up to the 11th floor, and that's a pretty serious floor. And the whole ride up there, we're looking at each other and we're waiting, because I thought they were going to split us up, but they took me and my brother up to the same floor, to the same wing, which is the East unit. The way it's broken up, it's like you've got this day room in the middle, and you've got cells all the way around. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up going back to the same.
So you're in the same block.
Yeah.
So you and your brother get pinched. You're in the same cell block. What's
first thing we do?
What's going through your head?
First thing we do, we play a little board game called You Sunk My Battleship. I'll never forget it. There was a little cart set up, and we grabbed the one thing we both recognized, which was the game of Battleship. We sat down at the table and we played Battleship. And I'll never forget that.
You're kidding me.
I swear to God.
So you guys get pinched going to the Bahamas on a boat.
Yeah.
You come back.
Yeah.
And the first thing
we get into this place, and I think it was at night, so it wasn't the first thing. We ended up going to sleep, and he has his own cell. I had my own cell. I had a cellmate, and I'll never forget this. His name was Richard King. And in talking to Richard was he was in the 80s, he was shipping boatloads of coke into the country. And he worked with the guy from the movie Blow, the movie that Johnny
Depp.
His character was I forget his real name in real life. Richard something. Anyways, I'm sorry, not Richard, but it was Richard King was my cellmate, and he was an older gentleman. Must have been in his mid to late 60s. And, I started talking to him about what had happened, and, the trouble I'm in. And he laughed. He's like, listen, it's nothing. He says, I'm facing 3 life sentences.
George was the guy's name.
George. Exactly. Yeah.
I remember Richie. Richie was.
So this guy was, he was bringing in, he would tell me these stories about a sailboat that he had that was big enough to load it down with, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of coke. And he would bring it in. And back then, there weren't many issues.
This is your cell.
This is my cellmate. And he happened to be at the FTC Miami location because he was appealing his own charges. So he was creating his own legal documents, and he was working there to appeal his charges. And he once told me, he's like, listen, if this old man doesn't get this appeal, there's no reason for me to be around anymore. It's like basically saying, if he doesn't get this appeal, he's going to end up offing himself. He's not going to, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life, locked up. But what a great guy to talk to and get to know for that little period of time. He told me the story about the fact that he had to burn off his own fingerprints to evade the DEA for as long as he did. And his fingers had no fingerprints. They were smooth. I saw it while he was talking to me. And so that's how serious of a guy this was. And he did one last deal, right? He was up in New York and he had somebody send it to him through the mail, and he ended up getting pinched on that last deal.
That was it.
He had a couple homes. He was living in like somewhere like maybe Wellington. I forget where he was living, but
all these guys, everything's in Florida. All these stories,
Florida,
all this fraud, everything.
Florida is the Wild West. Growing up as a kid, all the families would come down from New York and they would operate down in Florida. And the rules down in Florida were a lot less. And the kid I was telling you about that I grew up with, not to bounce around, but his father was part of a family called the Trafficante family out of Tampa. It was the end of this family. If you remember Donnie Brasco, Santo Trafficante was on the yacht with Donnie Brasco when they were doing that little business meeting. And that family was a real family. They're out of Tampa, and this kid's father was the one that was like a boss of that family. Anyways, South Florida was always that way. It's always been the Wild West when it came to stuff like that. Kind of talked about what was going on and, came to the conclusion that I had no prior record. I was in the military, and for me to go up in front of the judge would have been easier to defend our situation and say, we both pled guilty. I mean, there wasn't any way of doing that unless I would have buried my brother, which I was going to do. I could have blamed it, made it sound like, his criminal record prevented us from saying we weren't. It just wouldn't look good. It would have been a tough go if we took it to court.
And how do you end up ultimately getting off and not?
I didn't get off. No, I ended up getting sentenced for being guilty of possession with intent to distribute. Okay. I got a year on house arrest, and I got 2 years probation.
No time served. Bro.
Yeah, no, I did. I ended up spending a week at FTC Miami. So she added that to time served. And the only reason why I was able to get a sentence like that was because I got a chance to speak. My attorney thought it would be a good idea if I got up and I spoke to the judge. And I told her that, we got involved with some people. It was a stupid decision. And, I was kind of honest with her and kind of gave her, I'll never forget, Judge Altanaga. She's a federal judge out of Miami. And she told me, if I ever see you again, I'm going to throw the book at you. But, and my attorney that time said it was the lightest he's ever seen her go. It was the latest sentence for me and my brother. My brother, with his extensive record, ended up only doing 2 years. So he ended up doing a drug class up in the Panhandle, which gives you a year off your sentence. He got sentenced to 56 months originally.
Now 56 months, that's no...
But it ended up only being 2 years when it was all said and done.
Now, did your military background help at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, I compiled a whole list of awards and things that I were given, and I presented that to her, and I also got up and I spoke to her and explained to her, it's out of our character. It's not something we do. And it was a turning point.
Okay, so how old are you at this point? So you're in your 30s.
Yeah, early 30s.
So you're in your 30s. The last 25 years, starting with the kid, you talk about how the way things are at the house, parents get divorced, you're hanging around with the wrong crowd. Now you're still in your 30s. You're still hanging around with
those tentacles of that life never let you go, especially coming back to South Florida and, you're around the people, it's not make believe. I mean, there's people that call it their business and they skirt the realms of good and bad or right from wrong. And they operate in that gray area. And that's all that is. I mean, there's just the whole, when you watch these movies and all this stuff, there's truth to it in some degree, in some aspects, but it's not really a fact.
But was this the catalyst then was there a wake up call? Your brother goes away, you don't. What are you thinking? Is there a time where you're like, okay, this has got to be it. I've got to decide.
That year that I wore that ankle bracelet was one of the hardest years of my life. Okay, for an entire year, I had to wear an ankle bracelet, and I had to report back. And this probation officer that I had was like, felt like he was like FBI. He was so far up my ass that I couldn't even. It was ridiculous. Always threatening to throw me back, and he was going to throw me in jail and all this stuff. It was just a tough year, man. I would have, looking back, I would have rather have gone and done a year in jail than to, have to deal with that. But in a lot of ways, I was lucky, and that was a wake-up call. The whole thing was a wake-up call. All the money that I ended up, making during that time ended up going in defense attorneys and, trying to get myself straight, and just a lot of unnecessary headaches created. Perfect record gone. I was in the military, had an outstanding career. I was honorably discharged. I did a lot of things well, and all that was thrown away for or at least I thought it was for one stupid decision. So you learn pretty quickly.
You can go back in time. You have a time machine, and you go back in time. You can have dinner with your 15-year-old self.
Yeah.
What are you telling him?
There's nothing I could have told nothing. I was told everything. You're growing up, all these people around you, don't do this, don't do that, but you don't listen. You're not listening. I fully believe we don't have the ability. Our path is our path. I'm sitting in this chair right now because that was the path that God decided for me, right? Nothing I could have said to myself. I wasn't going to listen.
Now, where does, you have free will to choose to do things then? If the path is already free,
I think we do have a little bit of free will, but I think our path, we definitely have free will. But I don't think that, I think things happen for a reason. I think,
I've always seen it as, is it God that's creating this path, or is God created already a path straight to him? And then, man, we kind of get in the way with our sinful nature.
Yes.
And we kind of go off the path, but then it wasn't the path he had intended for us, but God will stay with us on that path.
Got it.
And want to learn our lessons. We'll kind of veer back on. Or in other ways, we talk about how God will take something that's a mess and he'll use it for good. So maybe he didn't want that to happen. He didn't want that life for you.
Yeah.
But he was able to still take that mess and use something good for that.
I feel like in each and every one of us, we have the light of God, right? God created us in his image. I met people where they have turned their back on God. You know what I'm saying? God, they don't want that path. They don't believe in him. They don't want any relationship. I was raised where I always, in the back of my mind, no matter what I was doing, even when I was doing the worst, I knew right from wrong. And I think that knowing right from wrong is a big deal, because during that path, when you're using your free will, that keeps you centered. It always brings you back. It always brings you back to the path that God has for you.
What would you say the best decision was that you ever made in your life, and what did that decision cost you?
I would say back in 2017, late 2017, early 2018, I got investigated by the FBI for people that I knew, people I was around, and I made the decision to kind of push myself away from that. I just had my daughter. My daughter was, a year and a half, and and that was probably the first time in my life where it really smacked me in the face. It took all that time, all those dealings, and all the people I was around to say, you know what, I don't want that path. I don't want to have to talk to my daughter through the payphone or through the, in a waiting room at a jail because I did something stupid. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of people, have to go to the waiting room to see their kids and watch the kids grow up as they're locked up. And I didn't want that. God's given me enough ability to, he's given me a lot of different things that it took me a long time to realize, attributes and things that I could use for good instead of the stupidity of, self-centeredness and, thinking the world revolves around me.
So at this point in your life, it sounds like this shell that you're talking about, you're actually starting to peel away the layers of the shell.
Yeah.
And just be who we're designed to be, and not trying to conform to societal standards, or not trying to fit in or fill a void that maybe you didn't get when you were younger.
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey. I mean, and it sounds like, you believe in God, And it sounds like he's been really influential about breaking away from this cultural ideal.
All the influences growing up, the music, the people I'm around, the places and all that stuff, the things that I thought were important. That was my experience growing up. And it wasn't until, 2017, 2018 when I finally said, that's enough. Enough's enough. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want that life. That was something inside of me that clicked. I would also say, but my grandmother passing away and watching her, the way she had faith. I mean, in her room, the Bible was open, and she passed away so gracefully. She wasn't afraid. And I've seen people where they get to the end and they're trying to get that last minute relationship with God and realize that they wasted so much time. And that's just hit me when I was holding her hand in the hospital room, and we knew that she wasn't going to make it. She was, she had cancer that just riddled her. That woke me up. That woke me up. Seeing her as peaceful as she was in her relationship, I wanted that relationship.
If you could implant one idea into everyone's head, then what would that idea be?
The idea that we're only here for a short period of time. What we do during that short period of time means a lot. We're here for a reason, and I think that reason is to positively influence this world, and in as many ways as we can. And I think if everybody understood that, I think we'd all approach life differently. If we understood how important our words are, how powerful our words are, how powerful a positive word can be, I think that that would be something I'd like people to understand. But I kind of got to understand exactly how powerful that is by, the reading I'm doing and the studying and going into like these different rabbit holes of thought. It's really opened my eyes to that.
Amen, brother. Well, that's all we have for now. Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
As always, everything we do and everything we talk about is to the glory of God and adding value to others.
Absolutely.
What's one final thought or message you want to give to the audience?
We're wasting time. I mean, we really, nobody, we all know at some point we're going to be looking down at our lives and, taking that little review. And how do you want that review to be? You want to be embarrassed and have those feelings of, oh, I wish I would have done things differently? Or do you want to say, you know what, I made the decision to turn around and start, positively impacting the people I'm around. And I feel like we all have the ability to do that. So I'm not going to waste. Every day I wake up, I'm trying to help make people's lives better and, bring people closer to God. And to me, that's the most important thing.
Amen. Well said.
Yeah, good man.
Yes.